Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive?
Always.
Awesome. Today, we're heading back to the 1870s.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, the Wild West, the American frontier, all that. And get this, we're diving into a story about, well, let's just say a family who weren't exactly known for their hospitality.
Oh, this sounds interesting.
It's a creepy one, that's for sure. We're talking about the Bloody Benders. Ever heard of them?
The name rings a bell, but refresh my memory.
Totally. So the Bloody Benders were this family who ran an inn out in Kansas, right smack dab in the middle of nowhere. Think dusty trails, weary travelers, and a seemingly cozy inn offering a warm meal and a place to rest.
Sounds pretty idyllic, actually. What's so bloody about that?
Well, that's where things take a dark turn. Let's just say their guests didn't exactly check out in the morning.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Yeah, and we're basing all this on a Wikipedia article about them, which is pretty interesting in itself.
It's amazing what you can find on Wikipedia. So, just from that one article, what are we looking to uncover?
Good question. I guess our mission is to piece together what we can about the Benders, their crimes, and why they became such a legendary part of American folklore.
The legendary family of killers. You've got my attention.
Great. So let's start with the basics. The family itself. We've got John and Elvira Bender, the parents and their children, John Jr. and Kate.
Okay, a typical frontier family. What's the catch?
Well, the sources we've got mention some inconsistencies about their relationships. Like, some folks claim that John Jr. and Kate weren't actually siblings, but maybe husband and wife.
A little too close for comfort, maybe?
Right. And their origins are super mysterious, too. No one really knew where they came from or what their life was like before they set up shop in Kansas.
So already we've got mystery layered upon mystery.
Exactly. It just adds to the creep factor. Now imagine this. Their inn was this little two-room cabin divided by a wagon cover. The front was a general store and common area, and the back was their living space.
Okay, so pretty standard setup for the time.
Right. But here's the thing. The dinner table, where they'd serve their guests, was placed right over a trap door leading down to a hidden cellar.
Wait a minute, are you saying what I think you're saying?
Yep. They basically turned their inn into a death trap.
Oh, wow. That's just chilling. So the unsuspecting guests would be sitting there, enjoying their meal, and bam, down they go.
Exactly. And to make things even creepier, Kate was like the star of the show. She was described as attractive and charismatic, bit of a local celebrity even.
Yeah.
She claimed to be a psychic and held seances and stuff.
Wow, so she was the distraction, luring people in with her charm?
Exactly. While she kept the guests entertained, the others would be getting ready to,
Take care of business.
yeah, let's just say take care of business. The sources say that John Sr. or John Jr. would whack the guest over the head with a hammer.
Oh, God, that's brutal.
It gets worse. Then one of the women would slit the victim's throat just to make sure they were, well,
Done for.
yeah. And then they'd dump the body through the trapdoor into the cellar. Brutal, right?
Yeah, absolutely horrific. But hold on, they didn't just start murdering people out of the blue, did they?
You're right. There were definitely signs early on that something was wrong. Like back in 1871, a guy named Jones was found dead in Drum Creek. Skull crushed, throat slit.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And as time went on, more bodies started turning up, all with similar injuries. You can imagine the fear and suspicion that started to grow in the community.
Absolutely. People disappearing, whispers of foul play. It must have been terrifying.
And then came the disappearance of Dr. William York in 1873. He was a well-respected guy, and he vanished without a trace after stopping at the Bender's Inn.
Oh, man. This sounds like a turning point.
It was. Dr. York had a brother, Colonel Alexander York, who was a pretty powerful figure. When the brother went missing, he wasn't going to let it go.
So Colonel York steps in and kicks off a full-blown investigation.
Exactly. He organized a meeting, and the whole community decided to search every homestead in the area.
And that's when they found out the Benders were gone.
Yep. Vanished. Left behind a wagon full of stolen goods, but no trace of the family themselves. And when they started searching the property, well, let's just say they found a whole lot more than they bargained for.
The trapdoor, the cellar, all of it.
Everything. The stench of decay led them to the bodies of 9 victims, all murdered in the same horrific way. They even found a young girl who they thought might have been buried alive.
Oh my God, that's just, I don't even have words.
It's pretty messed up. The Benders' reign of terror was finally exposed, but the question remained, where did they go? So the Benders just disappeared? Poof! Into thin air. Like no one ever found them.
Nope, not officially. And that's what makes this story, I don't know, so fascinating, so frustrating, so creepy, right? No closure.
It's crazy. A $3,000 reward, and no one ever came forward with a definitive answer.
It makes you wonder, right? Like, did they really manage to escape justice completely, or did something else happen to them?
The sources mention all sorts of rumors about vigilante justice, like maybe they were caught and lynched or killed in a shootout and no one ever said anything.
It's easy to imagine how folks would want to take matters into their own hands after such horrific crimes, especially back then. But who knows? It's all just speculation.
It is. But there's this one theory I read about that connects the Benders to another outlaw gang, the Kelly family.
Wait, really? The Kelly gang?
Yeah. Apparently, someone who looked into the case thought the two groups might be one and the same, like because of some similarities in their methods and family structure.
It's interesting. But I mean, is there any real proof?
Not that I could find. Feels more like people trying to connect the dots between two famous outlaw stories. But still, it makes you think. Speaking of connections, there's one that really blew my mind. The author Laura Ingalls Wilder, from Little House on the Prairie. Well, according to her, her family actually stopped at the Bender Inn.
Get out of here. Are you serious?
I swear, it's in her writings. It makes you wonder if little Laura Ingalls might have, crossed paths with these notorious killers.
That's wild. What a weird little detail of history, right?
Right. And get this, she even wrote about how her dad helped search for the Benders and how he was convinced they'd never be found.
He said that. Wow.
Yep. And Laura herself wrote something like, "Later I formed my own conclusions why." It's almost like she had some secret knowledge about what happened, but never spilled the beans.
Man, that's such a tease. It would be amazing to know what Charles Ingalls thought was going on or what Laura figured out later on.
Totally. But so far, it's a mystery. But let's move on to the physical evidence.
No.
Was anything found at the Bender Inn that could tell us more about their crimes?
Actually, yeah. Some pretty interesting stuff was recovered. 2 hammers were found, and people think they were the murder weapons.
Wow. The actual hammers.
Yep. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
Years later, they ended up in a museum on display for everyone to see.
That's both fascinating and kind of disturbing, right? To think of those hammers used for something so horrific.
Yeah.
On display like historical artifacts.
It's a reminder that history isn't just dates and names in a textbook. These were real people, and these events, as awful as they were, really happened.
True. And speaking of chilling reminders, there was also a blood-stained knife found hidden in a clock at the inn. Colonel York, Dr. York's brother, found it.
Wow, even a clock. So much for time heals all wounds, huh?
Right. It just adds to the whole gruesome picture. And that knife, or at least the one they think is the right one, ended up in a museum too, though I don't think it's on display anymore.
Probably for the best. But still, it's another piece of the puzzle, another link to the Benders' crimes.
Totally. So here's what we know. The Benders vanished, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and a community forever marked by their crimes. And they basically became this, cautionary tale on the frontier.
They became larger than life, right? A symbol of the dangers lurking beneath the surface of what seems like ordinary life.
Exactly. I mean, think about it. Their inn was on a busy trail. People were constantly coming and going, and no one suspected a thing. It's like this terrifying reminder that you never really know what's going on behind closed doors.
Right. The Benders basically shattered the illusion of safety and hospitality. Their crimes showed the dark side of westward expansion, where opportunity and danger were often intertwined.
So what have we learned from this deep dive into the world of the Bloody Benders? Well, it's clear their disappearance is just as intriguing as their crimes.
Absolutely. It's a story that keeps you guessing, keeps you on the edge of your seat, even after all this time. And it makes you think about the nature of good and evil, how easily things can go wrong, and how some mysteries might never be solved.
It's wild to think about, right? The Benders pulled off all these horrific crimes, then just vanished.
And left everyone wondering, right? Like, what happened to them? Where did they go? Did they ever pay for what they did?
Exactly. And with that $3,000 reward hanging out there, you'd think someone would have spilled the beans.
Right. $3,000 back then. That's a fortune. But no one ever officially claimed it, which, of course, just adds to the mystery.
And it wasn't just the reward. For years after the Benders disappeared, people claimed to see them everywhere. Imagine that, right? Any 2 women traveling together. Suddenly people are whispering, "Are those the Benders?"
Talk about looking over your shoulder for the rest of your life. It's almost like they became this boogeyman story, the Benders lurking around every corner.
Totally. Their story had that much power, to scare people, to fascinate them, to make them wonder.
Oh, absolutely. It speaks to just how much Their crimes and their escape really captured the public's imagination.
It reminds me of that case in Michigan in 1889. Two women were arrested because someone thought they were the Bender women.
Oh, yeah, I read about that. It was a whole big trial, right?
Yeah, media circus. Some women claimed that Mrs. Monroe, one of the women arrested, was Elvira Bender. But Mrs. Monroe insisted she had nothing to do with the murders.
It must have been pretty chaotic trying to sort out the truth back then. I mean, no DNA testing, no fancy forensic techniques, just eyewitness accounts and rumors, really.
Right. Talk about unreliable. In the end, they had to let the women go because they just didn't have enough evidence to convict them.
It makes you think about all the people caught up in the aftermath of the Benders' crimes. Not just the victims and their families, but anyone even remotely connected to the case.
It's a ripple effect, right?
Uh,
The Benders' actions had consequences that reached far beyond their little inn in Kansas.
For sure. I mean, the Bender story became a warning, a cautionary tale about the dangers of the frontier. It made people question who they could trust, reminded them that evil could lurk anywhere, even in a seemingly ordinary place.
Which I think is what makes it so unsettling. The fact that the Bender Inn wasn't some remote hideaway. It was right on a busy trail. People were stopping there all the time, completely unaware of the horrors happening inside.
Right. It really played on those fears about the unknown, that even in the midst of progress and civilization, there was still this element of danger, this wildness that couldn't be tamed.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the world of the Bloody Benders, I'm left with this feeling of, like, unsettled curiosity. We explored the evidence, analyzed the rumors, and still, so many questions remain.
Yeah, I get that. Their story just highlights how history is rarely black and white. There are always gaps, unanswered questions, mysteries that might never be fully solved.
Exactly. The Benders story really makes you realize that truth can be elusive, and that sometimes the most compelling stories are the ones that leave us wanting more, leave us with that lingering sense of wonder and unease.
It's a reminder that the past, even the darkest parts of it, continues to shape how we see the world today, and that some mysteries just might never be fully explained.
Well, listeners, that about wraps up our exploration into the chilling story of the Bloody Benders. We dove into the history, the evidence, the rumors, and the enduring mystery that continues to surround this infamous family.
Hopefully, we've sparked your curiosity and maybe even inspired you to do a little digging of your own.
There's so much more to uncover. And who knows, maybe someday someone will finally solve the mystery of the Bloody Benders. But for now, we'll have to leave you with that lingering sense of wonder, a bit of a chill down your spine, and the reminder that sometimes truth is stranger and more terrifying than fiction.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. And until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep the lights on.